If you woke up this morning thinking it was just another cold January day, I need you to understand something right now. What happened in European energy markets in the last 7 days is not a correction. It is not volatility. It is the sound of a continent realizing it destroyed its own energy security, and there is no going back. At exactly 6:45 a.m. Central European Time on January 16th, 2026, the Dutch TTF natural gas benchmark crossed 37.63 euros per megawatt hour. That is a 13.5% jump in 24 hours. In the past week alone, European gas prices have exploded more than 30%. Let me say that again, 30% in 7 days. This is the largest weekly price surge since October 2023. This is not normal market behavior, this is panic. CNBC will not explain this to you. Bloomberg will dance around it with charts about seasonal demand. The Financial Times will tell you Europe is prepared for winter. They are lying. They have been lying for 2 years, and now the mathematics of their deception are catching up. I am going to show you the exact numbers they are hiding, the mechanism of how Europe broke itself, and what this means for every person paying an energy bill on that continent. The data I am about to present comes directly from Gas Infrastructure Europe, from KPLR Analytics, from the European Commission's own reports. This is not speculation. This is documented reality. Before we go any further, I need you to do something. If this information matters to you, if understanding what is actually happening in global energy markets is important, hit that subscribe button right now. The algorithm actively suppresses content that challenges mainstream energy narratives. Every subscription, every like, every share is an act of resistance against the information gatekeepers who want you blind and compliant. Do it now, because this video may not stay up for long. Now let me take you back to a specific moment. January 1st, 2025, 8:00 a.m. Central European Time. At that precise second, natural gas stopped flowing through Ukrainian pipelines from Russia to Europe. 60 years of supply, gone. The transit agreement between Russia and Ukraine expired, and Ukraine refused to renew it. The stated reason was the ongoing military conflict. The real consequence was Europe cutting off one of its last reliable pipeline sources of affordable gas. And the architects of European energy policy celebrated. They called it energy independence. I call it economic suicide. I have watched energy markets for decades. I have seen the 1973 oil embargo reshape global politics. I watched the 2009 Russia-Ukraine gas dispute send shivers through European capitals. I analyzed every move during the 2022 energy crisis when prices hit levels that bankrupted entire industries. And I am telling you now, what I see forming in January 2026 follows the exact same pattern that precedes catastrophic market dislocations. The signs are all there if you know how to read them. Low storage levels, supply constraints, demand shocks, and most dangerously, policymakers in denial. Let me explain exactly how the European gas market works so you understand why these numbers matter. The Dutch TTF serves as the benchmark price for natural gas across Europe. Think of it as the heartbeat of European energy. When TTF moves, electricity prices follow. When electricity prices move, everything from manufacturing costs to heating bills follows. Gas is not like oil where you can quickly redirect tankers. Gas requires pipelines or specialized LNG import terminals. It requires storage facilities that take years to build. When you cut off a major pipeline source, you cannot simply replace it overnight. You cannot replace it in a year. The physics of energy infrastructure do not care about political declarations. The major players in this system are Norway, which provides 120 to 124 billion cubic meters per year through North Sea pipelines, the United States, which has become Europe's leading LNG supplier at 55 to 60 billion cubic meters annually, and previously Russia, which in 2021 provided over 40% of Europe's total gas imports. That Russian share has now collapsed to around 8% of EU imports. The theory was that LNG would fill the gap. The reality is that LNG cannot fill the gap. Not at these volumes, not in the time frame needed. The crime being committed against European citizens is not difficult to understand. Their own government systematically dismantled reliable energy supply in the name of geopolitical posturing, And now those same governments are pretending everything is fine while the data screams emergency. This is fraud. Not financial fraud in the legal sense, but a fraud of narrative, a fraud of expectations, a fraud against every citizen who was promised that energy security would be maintained. Let me show you the mathematics of this disaster. Current EU gas storage levels sit at 51.9% of capacity. The 5-year seasonal average for this time of year is 67%. That is a deficit of more than 15 percentage points. Do you understand what that means? It means Europe entered this winter with almost no buffer. It means every cold snap draws down reserves that cannot be replaced until summer. It means there is no margin for error, and it gets worse. In just 11 days of January 2026, Europe burned through 8.2 billion cubic meters of natural gas. Let me do that calculation with you. 8.2 billion cubic meters divided by 11 days equals approximately 745 million cubic meters per day on average. But on January 7th and 8th, consumption hit nearly 1 billion cubic meters per day. 1 billion per day. At this rate, at this burn rate, Europe cannot make it through winter without severe stress on the system. This is not normal. Not when storage started the winter already depleted. Not when the primary pipeline backup no longer exists. Not when the alternative, LNG, requires competing with Asian buyers who are also facing cold weather. Not when France, one of Europe's largest economies, has only 29.85% of its storage filled. Not when the UK sits at 25.73%. Not when Transnistria, the separatist region of Moldova that was completely dependent on Russian gas, has been entirely cut off since January 1st, 2025, with no alternative supply. But wait, it gets even more concerning. The cold is not over. Meteorologists are tracking what they call the beast from the east, Arctic air masses pushing into Europe, and they expect it to return multiple times before winter ends. Each arrival forces more gas out of storage. Each arrival pushes prices higher. Each arrival brings Europe closer to the edge. The people who made these decisions knew this would happen. They had the data. The European Commission knew that ending the Ukraine transit deal would tighten supply. They knew that storage levels were already 42% below the previous year at the end of the 2024-2025 heating season. They knew that KPLR was projecting storage to end the 2025-2026 winter at just 36% capacity, and they let the transit deal expire anyway. They chose geopolitics over energy security. They chose symbolism over survival, and now European citizens are paying the price. Here is what the mainstream will not tell you about LNG. Europe has become the world's largest LNG importer since 2022. In the first half of 2025, European LNG imports hit an all-time high of 92 billion cubic meters, up 25% year over year. By the end of 2025, the continent imported 109 million tons of LNG, 28% more than 2024. These are record numbers, and they are still not enough. Why? Because LNG is a global market. When Europe bids for cargoes, so does Asia. And right now, Asia is facing its own cold wave. China, Japan, South Korea, they are all entering the market looking for the same LNG shipments Europe desperately needs. In the first half of 2025, Asian demand was weak, Chinese LNG imports dropped more than 20%, and Europe benefited. Those weak fundamentals gave Europe breathing room. That breathing room is disappearing. If China experiences a colder than normal winter, and current forecasts suggest it might, Chinese buyers will aggressively pursue LNG cargoes. When that happens, the price goes to whoever pays more. Europe does not have priority. Europe does not have guaranteed supply. Europe has a checkbook and hope. And hope is not a strategy. Let me walk you through what this looks like in practice. A cargo of LNG leaves the United States bound for Europe. Somewhere in the Atlantic, Chinese buyers offer a premium. The ship diverts to Asia. Europe gets nothing. This is not hypothetical. This happens, and it will happen more as Asian demand recovers. Goldman Sachs projects Asian gas demand to rise more than 4% in 2026, with LNG imports increasing 10%. Every percentage point of Asian demand growth is gas that does not reach European ports. Why does Germany matter so much in this story? Because Germany was supposed to be Europe's industrial powerhouse. Because Germany was importing 55% of its natural gas from Russia when the invasion of Ukraine began. Because Germany has now experienced the worst economic performance of any major economy globally, contracting 0.9% in 2023, another 0.5% in 2024, and projections show a third consecutive year of recession in 2025. The Handelsblatt Research Institute called it the greatest crisis in post-war German history. This is not hyperbole. This is their analysis. The industrial damage is permanent. RWE's CEO Markus Kreber told the Financial Times that the energy crisis has permanently damaged German industry. Structurally higher gas prices mean structurally higher costs for every energy-intensive manufacturer. Steel, chemicals, fertilizers, they cannot compete. Celanese shut down polymer production in Hamm. Allnex closed its Hamburg facility. BASF is closing multiple plants in Ludwigshafen, eliminating 700 jobs with more closures planned through 2026. In total, there have been 12 major industrial closure projects tracked in Germany in the past year alone. 12. And where is the capital going? To America. German companies nearly tripled their investments in the United States in 2023, reaching $15.7 billion. Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, RWE, they are all expanding in America while shrinking in Germany. This is not investment diversification. This is capital flight. This is industrial hollowing. This is the direct consequence of destroying your own energy security. Let me give you more context on what happened when the Ukraine transit stopped. At 8:00 a.m. on January 1st, 2025, the flow of Russian gas through Ukrainian pipelines to Europe ceased. Gazprom lost approximately $5 billion in annual gas sales. Ukraine lost up to $1 billion per year in transit fees. Slovakia lost about 200 million euros annually in transit revenue, and now pays more for gas from alternative sources. Austria and Slovakia had to quickly arrange new supply contracts with companies like BP, Eni, ExxonMobil, RWE, and Shell. They managed. But at what cost? The response from European officials? Celebration. They called it breaking free. They called it energy independence. Dan Jorgensen, the Commissioner for Energy and Housing, said the EU was well prepared for winter with the system resilient against supply disruptions. The data says otherwise. Storage at 51.9% when it should be at 67% is not resilience. It is vulnerability dressed in bureaucratic optimism. Now I need you to understand what happens next. This is the timeline of consequences that the mainstream will not give you. In the next 7 days, cold weather persists across Europe. Temperatures are forecast to stay below normal through the end of January. Every day of cold means more gas drawn from storage. TTF prices likely remain above 35 euros per megawatt hour. Asian buyers continue assessing their own needs. If they increase purchases, European spot prices will spike again. In the next 30 days, February brings continued heating demand. If the pattern holds, storage could drop below 45%. At that level, governments begin considering industrial demand curtailment. Not blackouts, not yet, but factories being told to reduce consumption so homes stay warm. France and the UK, with their critically low storage, will feel this first. Energy-intensive industries face impossible choices. Over the next 90 days through February and March, we see the end of winter and the beginning of what should be the refilling season. But here's the problem. If Europe ends winter with storage at 36% as copper projects, the entire summer becomes a desperate race to refill before next winter. Prices do not fall in the usual seasonal pattern. Competition with Asia intensifies for summer deliveries. European utilities sign long-term contracts at elevated prices, locking in high costs for years. Beyond 90 days, April and onward, Europe finds itself trapped. Low starting inventory means the entire injection season is spent catching up. If any supply disruption occurs, if there is any geopolitical shock, Any Asian demand surge, any infrastructure problem, there is no buffer. The cycle repeats. Low storage leads to high prices, leads to difficulty refilling, leads to low storage. This is the new normal. This is what energy insecurity looks like. Now I have to make this personal for you, because these are not just numbers on a screen. These are consequences that will hit your life, your savings, your future. Where do you stand in this? If you live in Europe, your heating bill for this winter will reflect these prices. Not immediately, but within weeks as contracts adjust to spot market reality. If you paid X last winter, prepare for 2X or 3X this winter. The mathematics are unavoidable. But what about your investments? Here's what most people do not understand. If you own European utility stocks, European industrial ETFs, or European bonds, you are exposed. When gas prices spike, electricity prices follow. When electricity prices spike, industrial margins compress. When margins compress, earnings fall. When earnings fall, stocks fall. This is not complicated. This is physics translated into finance. Let me be specific. Say you have 10,000 euros invested in a European industrial ETF. Companies in that fund, manufacturers, chemical producers, auto parts suppliers, they all use energy as a major input. When energy costs rise 30% in a week, their margins do not rise 30%. Their costs rise 30%. The value of your investment reflects that reality. You do not see it immediately. But over the quarter, over the year, that 10,000 euros buys less than it did. This is how energy inflation destroys wealth. Think about what happened to ordinary citizens in past energy crises. In the 1970s, oil shocks, inflation devastated savings across the Western world. In the 2022 European energy crisis, small businesses closed by the thousands. Bakeries that could not afford to run ovens. Restaurants that could not afford to heat dining rooms. These are not abstract statistics. These are livelihoods destroyed because energy policy failed. Who do you think pays when BASF closes plants in Ludwigshafen? Not the executives who made poor strategic decisions. Not the politicians who destroyed energy supply chains. The 700 workers losing their jobs pay. The communities that depended on those factories pay. The small businesses that supplied those plants pay. The burden always falls downward. Why do I need you to understand the fraud of paper energy assets? Because many people believe they are protected through diversification. They own energy ETFs. They own natural gas futures contracts. They think they are hedged. But here's the truth. Paper claims on energy are not the same as actual energy. When there is a physical shortage, when there literally is not enough gas to heat homes and run factories, your paper claim does not keep you warm. It does not power your business. It just represents a number on a screen while the real world experiences scarcity. The European Commission's own regulations required underground storage to be 90% full by November 1st each year. This year, Europe entered November below that threshold and has been drawing down ever since. The regulation exists precisely because they know the danger of low storage. And yet here we are, at 51.9% in mid-January, watching prices explode, watching the buffer disappear. Why did France end up with only 29.87% storage? Why did the UK sink to 25.73%? Why is Transnistria sitting in the dark and cold? Because the system was designed for a world where Russian pipeline gas provided reliable baseload supply. That world no longer exists, and the replacement system based on LNG simply does not have the capacity to handle peak demand during cold winters. The infrastructure is not there. The ships are not there. The regasification terminals are not there. Physics does not care about policy aspirations. Here's what you need to do. These are specific, actionable steps to protect yourself. First, audit your energy exposure immediately. If you are in Europe, review your heating contract. Understand when prices adjust. Calculate what a 50% or 100% increase means for your monthly budget. Do not wait to be surprised. Second, diversify away from European energy-dependent assets. If your portfolio is heavy in European industrials, European utilities, or European bonds, understand that all of these are exposed to energy price volatility. Consider shifting allocation toward regions with energy security. toward companies with low energy intensity, toward hard assets that maintain value regardless of energy prices. Third, consider physical preparations. If you can improve home insulation, do it now. If you can install a heat pump, do it now. If you can reduce dependency on natural gas for heating, do it now. These are investments that pay for themselves many times over in an environment of sustained, high energy prices. Fourth, stock essentials before the next price spike. Non-perishable goods, household supplies, anything you will need in the coming months, buy it now. Retail prices follow energy prices with a lag. Every week you wait is a week of paying more. Fifth, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. This situation is evolving rapidly. The information I provide here will not appear in mainstream coverage. Stay informed because ignorance is not protection, it is vulnerability. Do not wait for official announcements. By the time governments admit there is a crisis, the window for preparation has closed. Do not assume this is temporary. The structural damage to European energy supply is permanent. Russia is not coming back. New LNG supply will not arrive until 2027 or 2028 in meaningful quantities. Do not believe the reassurances. When officials say Europe is prepared, look at the numbers. 51.9% storage is not prepared. 30% weekly price increases are not prepared. Industrial closures are not prepared. The train is leaving the station. Every day you delay action is a day closer to being caught by events instead of ahead of them. The window is closing. The cold is not over. The storage is draining. The prices are climbing. The buffer is gone. Remember this number, 51.9%. That is your margin of safety. That is what stands between European energy markets and crisis. Less than 52% storage in mid-January with weeks of winter remaining. That is not preparation. That is prayer. Your energy future is your responsibility. The governments that destroyed European energy security will not protect you. The media that hid this reality will not inform you. You have the information now. What you do with it determines what happens to you, to your family, to your savings. The choice is yours. The time is now. The consequences are forever.